So good morning, good afternoon to everybody joining us from somewhere on the planet. Welcome to this presentation and thanks for joining me in this presentation titled Building an ISO 13485 Compliant Engineering Company with Odoo. My name is Cedric. I'm the CEO and co-founder from Mermax Motor. I will give you a very brief introduction to our company in a minute. What are we going to be talking about this morning? A few words about the company and to whom this use case will apply. Then a few words about the ISO 13485 QMS. It's a very broad topic, so I will be very short on this. And then we'll spend more time on explaining how we map the different modules of Odoo with the requirements of the specification before talking about three special topics of interest: traceability, manufacturing, and inventory. Company Mermax designs and manufacture electric micromotors. So those are super strong, super small electric motors about the size of a big cigar that will go into products such as surgical tools. And they provide a really super high power density. That's the core of our added value. We are a spin-off from UC Louvain, and the university next door. And today we are exporting our products to B2B customers worldwide, mainly Europe and the US. And in December 2020, we actually got ISO 13485 certified. To whom this use case will apply? Any hardware engineering company. It does not matter whether you have mechanical or electronics product. If you are hardware based, this presentation is for you. If you are only focusing on software programming, consulting, or R&D services, then it's probably not so interesting. But if you are an hardware company, if you live in the world of Altium, SolidWorks, and the others, this is for you.
Hi, Cedric. It's Marcelo, your friendly neighbor doer. I just would like to ask you, I understand you were a user when you implemented this solution, and I would like to, if you can explain to us, how was the experience between the support from Odoo and the implementation that you did, how it went?
It went very well. So we had a reasonably good knowledge of Odoo, and we got help from the different people from Odoo through a package that we had purchased at that time. We were able to implement most of the functions by ourselves and got some help from the Odoo support for the more advanced functions. So it will apply to you, this presentation will apply to you if you are today manufacturing or assembling devices or subcomponents for the medical industry. You can leverage Odoo to get ISO 13485 certified or FDA 21 CFR. That's the, I would say it's simplification, the American equivalent of ISO. This is the most well-known quality management system for medical devices. It's a variant of the ISO 9001. And in our case, we've been using Odoo V12 and extensively use the Studio app in the system. So a few important aspects. Quality is really super important for us. It's a must-have if you want to sell to medical B2B customers. To a certain extent, I would say it's more important than the ERP. So in that sense, it was the ultimate test for Odoo. If we had not been able to implement this QMS with Odoo, we would have likely switched to another ERP vendor, but it worked perfectly. I will show you in a minute that we were able to do that, to do the implementation efficiently and quickly. My advice is definitely start early. It's easier to implement something like this from scratch than to convert an old, inflexible legacy system. And you will need an external ISO 13485 consultant on top of any Odoo consultant you may have. This is required because there are some important documentation requirements that only a specialized personnel can help you with. A few words about ISO 13485. It's a complete quality management system, 10 big chapters with a strong focus on documentation, traceability, and demonstrability. The principle is document what you do and do what you documented. So you have to explain in written format what you're going to do, what are your process, and then you will perform as you have explained, and record all the informations when doing the manufacturing operation. You will need an external audit to be performed to get certified. That's mandatory. It takes approximately 3 days of audit, and I would say that we passed the audit the first shot, and we actually impressed the auditor with the quality of the ERP system that act as the backbone infrastructure of the implementation. Let's spend some time discussing about different big blocks of the specification. The first one is customer, all the aspects related to commercial customer requirements. The second one are all the realization processes, design, manufacturing, and the supply chain aspects. The third big block is everything related to steering and the management. You have then the resource management in the middle, and on the side some measurement and monitoring specifications. Three of those modules are not really extremely related and linked to the ERP, so we'll not be talking about this morning. Management, for example, it's more the way you will be handling the audit or the internal management review. So I don't plan to talk about that this morning. Now the great news, because of the integrated and multi-module nature of Odoo, you will be able to do all of that quickly, and it will dramatically simplify your job. A few examples of how we map this to the Odoo modules. All the customer requirements defined per the ISO specification could be easily handled with the contact app, the sales and invoicing modules, as well as Studio. The Studio is extensively used because we create a very high number of custom fields, but the number of additional codes that we had to create is not huge. It was probably less than 200 lines of Python code. Then for manufacturing and supply chain, we use extensively the manufacturing app, the picking app, the inventory app, the barcode, the purchase module, the default purchase module, as well as some assets management system, which is actually a derivative of Odoo's inventory module. For the infrastructure, we use the SaaS, so the Odoo Online. Documentation was not implemented with Odoo. It's actually a link to Office 365 because when we started the documentation implementation, the document management from Odoo was not yet available. It was very practical, and we were able to programmatically include links to Office in Odoo. For the human resources, we can leverage the employee app. And then not showed really on this map, we also used IoT and PLM, but those modules are under test right now and were not formally required for the certification. Topic of interest, the first one is traceability. It's super important for the norm, and you can easily use the traceability function from Odoo. We configured all our products by lot. We had to develop some custom code for integrating into the lot number a special code for identifying the supplier and the date. And we create also some custom fields to link the different manufacturing order to the exact equipment tag and the version of the assembly manuals that were used, and can be almost all the same, but a few differences, and must be tracked from a quality point of view. There is 100% chance that the auditor will require a traceability demo, so it's very easy to link the products you have built to the manufacturing order, to the sales order, to the receipt. That's done by default very well by Odoo. And the only thing that we still have to implement, or I would say implement in a better way in the ERP, is the tracking of the soft items in the bill of material. Soft items are, for example, the version of the firmware that is used in an programmable electronic device. Second topic of interest, manufacturing. We use the Odoo manufacturing app with 6 steps on 4 workstations.
Hey, Cedric, sorry to interrupt again. I understand that the manufacturing app, as you said, has integrations all over in Odoo: inventory, purchase, sales, picking, bill of material, everything. And I understand that were also fully online with your system before you implemented this new solution for the ISO. Can you tell us a little bit on how it was changing from one process to the other and your workflows? Did it change anything before and after you do that?
Yes, so I wouldn't say the process, the flows really changed before and after. The different flows were uh, adapted to make sure that some critical points that are required from a compliance point of view were properly taken care of. It can include some restrictions, it can include some additional fields, and so we were able to use the full MRP package, manufacturing, and everything else almost as is. We had to develop customization though, for example, picking with enforced QA rules. Um, and we also created additional steps that are required per the specification. The example is, for example, like commissioning, when you prepare the production line in a very specific way before manufacturing will actually start. And then the batch release step, which is very important, and it's actually the step during which you will record and verify that everything has been done properly from a QA point of view. In this case, we made sure that the batch releases could only be done by another person than the operator who had done the manufacturing, so that a second pair of eyes can verify what has been done. The third topic of interest, and probably the part that required the most customization, was inventory and IQI. At Mermex, we have many different types of products, and most of them have to be carefully verified before being fully received in the company. So we have actually 3 flows in parallel. We have, like the one you can see on the screen, a simple flow: parts are received and put in stock. Sometimes you have to go through an IQI process.
Hi, Cedric. Sorry to interrupt again, but I'm here for that, right? So sorry again. What is an IQI and how does it happen? How does it goes?
So IQI means incoming quality inspection. It's based on a simple process. It's good to trust your vendor, but it's better to control them. So each and every part that is received, we receive components from everywhere in the world. Every component has to be verified, carefully measured. You know, we are a micro-mechanical company, so we measure things very precisely, and it's extremely important to do so because very often you have to return batches or switch to another supplier because the one you have initially selected is not reliable and does not deliver what he promised. So we want to make sure we verify in and every component that gets in the company. And so that's the process of this flow number 2. And you can even have more complex flow when some parts have to be stored in a very special area, like for example, a freezer or controlled atmosphere storage area in the company. So we had to create those flow, modify and customize the inventory app. We're extensively using the barcode as well, so make sure that when we pick the different components, we select the right one. And we have developed custom roads and warehouse location, like I just described. A few points of attention: flexibility versus enforcement. For picking operation, for PLM, you know, Odoo is great at giving you a lot of flexibility. That's super important when you're designing your system for the first time. But as the system matures, you will want to give more focus on enforcement. So enforcement means a decrease of flexibility. That's typically the case with PLM today. We want to make sure that the different parts are approved through the PLM apps, but we also want to make sure that no one could create a part that would not be forced to go through this PLM flow. Soft items from the BOM also must be recorded. We initially used Excel, and we'll now want to implement that in the ERP as well. Beware of the difference between marketing part number and manufacturing part number. The marketing part number is the thing that the customer use when ordering the different parts. Internally, we also have manufacturing part number on which we do not give a visibility to the customer. But obviously, the challenge is to link the right manufacturing part number to the right marketing part number. Otherwise, the customer ends up with the wrong parts being received. And then there was also this question of how to use the version in Odoo versus a revision. Initially, we had designed the system to use the version, but we quickly realized that it was not the best choice, because in our industry, you sometimes need two versions to be available at the same time, so the previous version and the new one, because there is an overlap of a phase out and a phase in when the customer is migrating to a new generation of product. So the key conclusions of this implementation: quality is really of utmost importance. Realize that if someone from your family has a car accident and has to go through surgery, the surgical instrument that will be used might be using a motor from Mermex, and it can really have some devastating effects if those products were not built and manufactured properly. ISO 13485 is the most trusted QMS in the medical industry. It's the most accepted standard, and the American equivalent is very similar. So if you have implemented once, it's easy to go back and forth and get certified for those two versions. Odoo is perfectly suitable to be an RIP supporting such a QMS. It has many important strong points. First of all, it's an integrated version, so it has one common flow of data and data points. So you always make sure that there is a single source of truth and that the flow can be reused for what you need. Many details are already taken care of for you. Like I said, for the commercial aspects of the spec, we're able to pretty much reuse what we had implemented as is in Odoo. We had to change a few things in the documentation, but many details are already taken care of for you. You need to align a few things with the spec, but it's very easy to do. You have multiple apps, so whether it's manufacturing, receiving, commercial invoicing, and so on, everything is integrated, and we could make use of many simple customizations. In the end, we were really able to gain some time and get it implemented in relatively quickly. What does it mean from a budget point of view? Implementation from design to the end was approximately 2 years. I would say the real ISO part of it was a year and a half. And in terms of budget, you should, in our case, we got everything done for approximately 150K from scratch. That includes approximately 50K for the consulting, approximately 50K for different ERP or IT customization, and the rest was the labor time from our project manager, who was really instrumental in implementing this system. So voila, quality is super important. It can, like I said, I think earlier in the presentation, it was a bit the ultimate test for Odoo, and we're happy to rely on their support, and looking now forward for any question you may have.
Hello, everyone. Good night.
Hello.
We are here with Cedric. Cedric, nice to meet you and to
nice
have
to meet you likewise, and hello world. Hello everybody.
So we will start the Q&A session for this talk that you just saw. So please jump in the chatter box and don't be shy. Start asking all the questions that you might have. So we know this is a very niche talk that you just saw. It's a very interesting one. So for all the companies maybe looking into something and doing something similar, this is your time to ask all the questions. I already have a couple of ones. So if you can tell us which version of Odoo are you currently using, Cedric?
So we're using Odoo version 12, and we intend to migrate to V14 in a few weeks, actually.
Okay, good. No V15?
Maybe, but the migration process is a long one, especially for a company. So we need to take the time to plan the implementation and also discover what's new in V15. I didn't get a chance to look at the keynote this morning, so it will be a good surprise, I believe.
There's a lot of new things that you will be happy to see. Now, you mentioned the implementation. Can you tell us a little bit how the implementation process went for your company?
So the implementation was pretty straightforward. We started 2 years ago. We took the time really to customize Odoo for our needs. That was the most important starting point, the foundation, because whatever you want to implement at the certification level, Odoo has to match your business process, and that's how we got started. Then we looked in more details at the requirements from the certification and the ISO 1344 requirements in particular, and we started to work in parallel, implementation on one side and documentation on the other side. So I mentioned in the presentation that it's critical to have a good documentation process, and thanks God, everything was matching, and therefore in 2 years, pretty much 2 years, we were 100% done with the work.
That's good. We were talking before this talk, yeah. And you mentioned that the whole implementation was done by, of course, someone from a consultant for ISO, but also one of our internal consultants, correct?
Yes, indeed. So you would need for sure an ISO 1344 expert. That's mandatory. Typically, especially for small companies, you don't have this kind of knowledge in-house. And in parallel to that, we had selected the success pack, like it is called, and with the help of the person from Odoo helping us as part of the success pack, we were able to implement everything mainly remotely. We invited the consultant a few times in our company, but it was not too difficult to do it remotely.
Okay, good. That's very good to hear. Also, I think that's a breath of hope for other companies.
It was. I mean, that's maybe the main point of my presentation, is to let everyone know that it's feasible. ISO certification, CFR regulations, that seems to be a big obstacle. It probably is in reality, but with an integrated system like Odoo, it really helps because many things already exist. And if it matches your business model, it's easy then to transpose that into the documentation.
Good. During your presentation, you mentioned something that really caught my eye. Your ISO consultant was surprised with Odoo. Could you elaborate a little bit on that?
Yes, so the Odoo, it was not the consultant, it was the auditor. So
Yes,
the auditor is the bad guy in the story, because it's the guy who will decide if you pass the certification or not. It's not unusual, especially if it's your first attempt, to fail, and then you have a kind of a recovery plan that you need to release. He was surprised because of the level of sophistication and a sound professional foundation that Odoo offered, and he had never seen this before. Because typically, especially the visual aspects of Odoo, because he's used to work with bigger companies that have much more complex ERPs, and therefore he was surprised for a first certification to see such a high level of achievement.
That's good. Well, that's good news for Odoo. So I have another question here, a little bit on another topic, if you don't mind. How do you handle approved vendors?
Okay. So we have actually created some special studio fields into Odoo to manage the level of acceptance and the level of quality risk associated with each supplier, and therefore some actions can only be taken with some suppliers that have a special field ticked in Odoo, so that we know who is typically a supplier for a prototype, someone we can use for whatever an engineer wants to purchase, and those that are really already qualified, approved, sometimes audited or had any sort of official assessment. For those, there is an additional field that we check, so that we indicate this is a reliable supplier. We know, based on experience, based on the audit that we have made, that we get good quality parts from them. Trust is good, but in the medical world, control is better.
Yes, of course. You mentioned that you have something that you can tick. Is it something on standard? Did you do something that you tick it when you
So
it's a
yeah, no,
standard you choose?
it's a custom field built with Studio.
Okay.
So they're typically that's what I mentioned in the presentation. Studio is very useful. We use it extensively, but for simple things. Sometimes it's a reference, a cross-reference. The total lines of codes we developed was probably less than 50 to 70. I'm not sure
Oh.
because there are, a lot of comments, lines, but it was pretty straightforward and could be done by an internal consultant at Odoo or most of the Odoo partners.
Okay, good. And do we have time for a last question? Yes. Are you doing your internal audits within Odoo?
We're not.
Okay.
So the internal audit is done in a separate format. It's mainly one central document that will go into our document management system, which is not based on Odoo, but is linkable from Odoo. So basically, we have a separate server and with an organized way of storing the files. It can be accessed programmatically, and the link is done by Odoo in a special custom studio field, actually.
Oh, okay. Okay, that's very interesting. Okay, well, I see we are getting a little bit more of questions, but unfortunately we are running out of time. So if it's okay with you, we will close the Q&A session now. I want to thank you for coming and
My pleasure.
sharing your experience. It was really nice meeting you and hearing about.
Well, thanks for having me.
No,
See you
thank you.
soon. Thank you.
Bye,
Bye bye.
everyone.